Flashpoint History presents the Battle of Poitiers. With the rise of Islam, the Arabic expansion explodes across the world map. The armies of the Caliphate rapidly capture Arabia, the Levant, and Syria. The Persian Empire falls, and the Byzantine are forced back. The stage is now set for the conquest of North Africa, which begins with a stunning victory at Heliopolis. The Byzantine are driven from Egypt, and Alexandria is soon taken. Over the next 60 years, the Arabian armies push west across the Maghreb. They managed to capture ancient Carthage in the year 698. As the westward move continues, the indigenous Berbers are incorporated into the army. These men swell the ranks and allow for Tangiers to be humbled in 708. With the capture of this city, nearly all of North Africa is now part of the Caliphate. Looking north across a small expanse of water, a Muslim army now heavy with Berber troops crosses into Spain in the year 711. These men are expertly led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, a veteran commander who is reinforced to a fighting strength of over 12,000 men. He is immediately detected by the Visigoth king Roderick. Roderick is an impulsive commander, and while he fields a larger force, the loyalty of his men is questionable. At the Battle of Guadalete, he rushes in, but as his forces smash in, he is abandoned by his nobles. Tariq and his veterans crush Roderick's flanks. The Visigoth army is quickly annihilated. With little opposition, Tariq moves on to quickly capture Toledo and then Cordoba. He is joined by his senior commander, Musa ibn Nusayr, who brings in another 18,000 troops. These two men make the conquest of Spain a lightning affair and even begin the conquest of France. With the exception of a few Christian kingdoms in the north, Al-Andalus, or the name that the Arabs have now given to their new territory in Spain, is nearly all but subjugated. Now raids begin across the Pyrenees into France. One in the year 721 meets a disastrous end at the Battle of Toulouse. Another in 725 makes it across France and to the city of Autun. But then, the campaign of 732 begins. A large army is assembled and placed under the command of Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi. It has nearly 50,000 troops and fields the feared and deadly heavy cavalry, a force that some say is nearly unstoppable. This army crosses the mountains and takes the city of Bordeaux by storm. It manages to win a decisive victory against Duke Odo of Aquitaine at the river Garonne. The Franks are forced to retreat, and there is little left to stop al-Ghafiqi and his army. Al-Ghafiqi now moves confidently on to take the rich city of Tours. But then suddenly his path is blocked. A last-ditch alliance of Odo of Aquitaine and the rising star, Charles Martel, have assembled their forces to oppose the armies of the Caliphate. They have taken up the high ground and won't budge. Al-Ghafiqi takes up battle position and brings his scattered forces in from across France. Once assembled, he sends his vaunted heavy cavalry into a direct charge. But surprisingly, the Franks hold their ground. However, just as the Arab horsemen are about to break through, Charles sends Odo into a daring raid deep into the enemy rear to attack their camp. When the Arabic forces see this, they break rank and race back against the orders of their commander. Despite his best efforts to hold his men in formation, al-Ghafiqi's line falls apart. Charles Martel seizes this opportunity, going from the defense to the offense, rushing down the hill and smashing into the Arab line. The battle becomes a slaughter. Charles Martel won a decisive victory and immortal glory that day. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi lay dead at his feet, his army smashed. The army of the Caliphate retreated from the field the next day, and eventually out of France altogether. They would never return in force ever again. Charles Martel, to be known to history as the Hammer, would go on to establish the Carolingian dynasty. His grandson Charlemagne would be part of the Christian reconquest and would go on to establish the Holy Roman Empire. To this day, historians debate the significance of this battle. Some say that it was here that Western Christendom was saved and the Islamic conquest finally stopped. Others argue that the Islamic conquest had already run out of steam and that this battle really wasn't that decisive. Either way, France was to remain a Christian state, and the Muslims would remain in Spain for another 700 years. Flashpoint History is a podcast dedicated to bringing history to life. If you enjoyed this video, come check out more on YouTube, or you can download the podcast episodes from iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or all the usual places that you can download podcasts. You can also follow along on Facebook and Twitter. Comments and feedback are always appreciated, and if you want to support the series on Patreon, all that information will be in the description below. This is Flashpoint History's War of the Worlds, Episode 4, The Tale of a Refugee and a Regent. In our last episode, we left off with the Islamic conquest of Spain, a conquest that became a lightning affair as the armies of the Caliphate deposed a fractured and crumbling Visigoth kingdom. This invasion made it over the Pyrenees and into France, but in 732 it was finally turned back at the Battle of Poitiers. However, the Caliphate had bigger problems as she was soon embroiled in 750 by civil war. As the Abbasids came to power, they savagely attempted to destroy all traces of their predecessors, the Umayyads. In this episode, we begin with the story of a Syrian refugee who had to flee to the ends of the known world, but in the process was destined to become the founding regent of a great dynasty. One of my favorite statements in history is the bold quote, "Sir, I have not yet begun to fight." It's the eternal statement of the optimistic underdog, and I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of people out there who have heard it. I mean, it doesn't just apply to battle or military conflict, but can be used for just about anything. I've probably used it myself half a dozen times while trying to run the hills of San Francisco. "Sir, I have not yet begun to fight." And the best part is that even if you lose at whatever endeavor you're undertaking, you're still making it a point to go down defiantly. And if you win, well, that makes the event that you're doing even more epic, right? But while many people have heard this statement, I'm also willing to bet that only a few know where it actually comes from. And I'm going to share a secret with you. The derivation of this statement is just as epic as the statement itself. The year is 1779, and during the height of the American Revolutionary War, or the War of American Rebellion, depending on what side of the Atlantic you're on, an American captain named John Paul Jones spotted a British convoy off the east coast of England and went in for the kill. His ship was known as the Bonhomme Richard, which was a converted merchantman, meaning that she was originally designed to haul cargo and was now quickly refitted with cannon in order to be a merchant raider. Well, what else do you expect from an upstart fledgling navy? In contrast, the flagship of the British convoy was the HMS Serapis, a 44-gun frigate that was designed from the keel up to be a ship of war. Her crew was trained to peak efficiency under the legendary harshness of the Royal Navy, and her officers were some of the best in the world. Jones was not intimidated. He sailed right in to pick a fight. The American got in a broadside and did some damage, but then it was the English captain's turn, and with the 3 broadsides he was able to produce, the Bonhomme Richard was blasted with critical damage from stem to stern. Masts and rigging were on fire. Crew dead, strewn across the decks. There were holes in the hull so big that British cannonballs literally flew right through her without hitting anything. This is what they call an inauspicious beginning. The 2 ships sailed closer and closer and actually got entangled in one another, at which point the British captain, a Captain Richard Pearson, even his name sounds kind of intimidating, looked down from his obviously superior position and asked Jones, "Have you struck?" Meaning, have you struck your colors? That is, do you surrender? To which Jones responded, at least according to later accounts, "Sir, I have not yet begun to fight," as a glint came to his teeth and the wind hit his lovely flowing hair just right. But of course, this only angered Pearson even more. How dare this American rebel challenge me? At which point, he sent a chunk of his crew over to board and then capture Jones's ship. Capturing an enemy ship, after all, was the epitome of humiliation. But Jones, seeing this, decided to do the exact same thing. He and his crew swung over to his opponent's ship. One of his men actually managed to get in a lucky shot while this was going on. A hand grenade he threw made it down into the gun deck, where it nestled in nicely amongst the gunpowder of the Serapis. The ensuing explosion killed a considerable amount of the crew below deck, and those who survived managed to stagger up only to face the fury of Jones's boarding parties. Captain Pearson looked down and could not believe what he had just witnessed. Half his crew was now either dead or being captured, and the other half, which was on board the Bonhomme Richard, had just realized that they had captured a broken, shattered, on-fire ship that was now quickly sinking, with his crew on board, mind you, into the frigid waters below. The English captain at this point had no choice but to surrender. John Paul Jones had himself a nice new ship. This man would go on to become one of the founding fathers of the American Navy and would be immortalized for his famous words, if indeed the story is true, "Sir, I have not yet begun to fight." Like I've said before, these words ring true for anyone who's had to deal with adversity and who has approached that adversity with resilience and defiance. One of the best examples I can give is the story of a Syrian prince during the mid-8th century that was forced to become a refugee. The man that I'm referring to was Abd al-Rahman I. Here was a man who was born into nobility. His father was Muawiyah ibn Hisham, who was an Umayyad prince, and his grandfather was Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, who was none less than the Caliph. Abd al-Rahman grew up as an Umayyad prince himself in Syria. He enjoyed the privileges that came with being a part of the court of Damascus. But then, in the year 750, the house of the Umayyah was overthrown in civil war. His family was defeated at the Battle of the Zab River by the rival Abbasid clan. The Abbasids, being a part of an opposing religious sect, felt that the Umayyad had unlawfully usurped the position of caliph and thus deserved nothing less than death. They were merciless in hunting down and dispatching any member of the clan of Umayyah that they could find. Think to yourself for a moment, what are the goals and thoughts of a normal person who is 19, even if you adjust for the time period? Because you see, at the age of 19, Abd al-Rahman I watched as his family was systematically killed off. At the age of 19, he became not just a refugee, but a fugitive in the land of his birth. It was in the middle of the night when the assassins came. He grabbed his sisters, his brother, and his 4-year-old son, Suleiman, and escaped to the south. All the while they were being hunted by Abbasid soldiers who managed to catch up with them in a small village near the Euphrates River. It was here that Rahman had to split up. He was forced to leave his son and sisters behind in hiding and escaped with only his brother. These two men made it under the cover of darkness to the Euphrates, and at the edge of the water they were spotted by their pursuers who galloped in for the kill. Rahman and his brother threw themselves into the water. And keep in mind, we're not dealing with a simple stream or a tributary, but with the vastness of a great river that is the Euphrates. Rahman swam literally for his life and emerged drenched in an exhausted heap on the other side. He had only a few moments to clear the water from his eyes when he realized that his brother was no longer with him. As he looked up, he saw that his brother, unable to complete the watery distance, had turned back. An armed gang of Abbasid horsemen were awaiting him, waving their hands and pleading amnesty if he was to simply come back and surrender to them right then and there. But here's the thing, our Umayyad prince knew a trap when he saw one. He pleaded with his brother to come back to him, but there was nothing that he could do. He watched as his brother was dragged from the river and forced to kneel with his back to the soldiers. One of them drew a sword and in a flash of steel beheaded his brother in front of him right there on the spot. The soldiers took his brother's head for a trophy and left the body to rot on the bank. At this point, the horsemen all began to look up and spot their next target. You see, this is how the political life of Abd al-Rahman began. It was said by later chroniclers that he ran off into the night until exhaustion overtook him. He must have collapsed in the wilderness as the minions of the Abbasids continued to close in. His luck, however, would persevere. He linked up with his old friend, Bedr, who was a freed Greek, and together they went incognito, traversing Palestine and the Sinai, and arriving finally in Egypt. The governor of Africa, Abd al-Rahman ibn Habib al-Fahiri, was a man with divided loyalties. He had plans of making North Africa an independent kingdom under his family's prominent name, the Fahiri, and when the Abbasids demanded his submission, he chafed under the pressure and began to invite the last few remaining members of the Umayyad into his domain under the banner of sanctuary. But the governor soon realized that the even more prominent Umayyad name posed an even greater threat to him, and he turned against Rahman and his followers. It was in the year 755 that our Umayyad prince now found himself dodging both Abbasid assassins and the henchmen of Ibn Habib al-Fahiri. He narrowly escaped execution in Egypt and made his way west into the Maghreb, which just happened to be the birthplace of his mother. Growing up, he must have heard many tales of the Berbers that inhabited the area. Indeed, as he made his way across, he encountered many factions that were still loyal to him and even rendered him assistance. It was later, in 755, which is after being on the run for 5 years, that he arrived at the city of Ceuta, just across the Strait of Gibraltar in Morocco. He was hesitant to go any further. If his past experience had taught him anything, it was that he was a marked target. What he did know, however, was that Spain was in turmoil, that multiple factions were all fighting for power, and most importantly, Spain was just about as far as he could get from the Abbasids. It was into this mess that he sent his friend, Bedr, to begin negotiations to get a feel of how he would be accepted, if at all. As it turned out, there were those in Spain that were from Syria, that were still loyal to the house of the Umayyad, and most importantly, were willing to follow Abd al-Rahman. In September of 755, he arrived finally in Spain. Now, the exact location and timing may be a bit off, but it is said that he arrived in the city of Almuñécar. Now, there is an impressive statue that they've put up, which is dedicated to his landing. If you watch the video accompaniment to this podcast or Google it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So after arriving, he was met by an outpouring of supporters. Again, there were many who were still loyal to his house. Some just wanted to confirm that his clan wasn't completely wiped out. News of his appearance spread like wildfire. It captured the minds and the hearts of the people. The current governor, Yusuf ibn Abd al-Rahman al-Fahiri, another member of the Fahiri clan, wasn't too happy with this new arrival. But for the time being, there wasn't much he could do about it. Fortune would once again shine on our runaway, as the governor of Spain had to first contend with an uprising in Zaragoza and then a Basque revolt in Pamplona. Rahman wasted no time, a testament to his character. He gathered his supporters and took the city of Malaga, and then moved on to take Seville, and then finally marched on the capital, Córdoba. In 756, the Guadalquivir River was nearly overflowing her banks. The Umayyad prince found himself on one side with a starving and fatigued army. Al-Fahiri had managed to bring his forces back from the northeast in time to confront this new threat. For a while, he remained on the opposite bank, and knowing that his opponent was low on supplies, he made it a point to have his men throw lavish barbecues every day, bringing in gluttonous amounts of food and eating it within sight of his enemy. Al-Fahiri, realizing the opponent that he was dealing with, even extended a diplomatic solution. He offered his daughter to Rahman in marriage, which was flat out rejected. Now the question is, was this out of contempt for a promise coming from the house of Fahiri, or just acknowledgement that he wasn't going to settle for anything less than the entire emirate? What is that expression that Julius Caesar said? I assure you I'd rather be the first person in a village than the second man in Rome. Rahman rushed his adversary at the Battle of Musara, which promptly followed this standoff, and just outside the walls of Córdoba, he appeared victorious. Al-Fahiri escaped with his life that day and retreated to Toledo to raise another force. But our Umayyad prince had rapidly grown in power. He didn't even bother chasing this man himself. Instead, he dispatched his newly appointed governor of Seville to take care of the man. Al-Fahiri didn't get too far. It was recorded that he was killed by his own men. His head was sent back to Córdoba as a present and was swiftly mounted on a bridge overlooking the river. Now, with most of his major opposition destroyed and a good portion of southern Spain under his control, Abd al-Rahman I declared himself Emir of Al-Andalus on Friday, May 14th, 756.